I suppose there's so many things tied up with sort of growing a growing a business, but I think probably the overarching pieces for me are that the combination of being transparent and empathetic, and like to do that, you have to be authentic and true to your values. Yeah.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation. And today our guest is Charlotte Gregson. How you doing, Charlie?
I'm good, thank you, Judith. How are you?
I'm fab. I'm curious though, is there any type of music that makes you jump up? Like when you were younger and you went out, was there like a track that made you like, this is it, I'm dancing now?
Oh, probably there are all sorts of tracks. I love to go out and dance. I'm a big trance and electronic dance music fan.
Wow.
Um, so I'm actually going to Tomorrowland, not next weekend, but the weekend after, which is the big festival in Belgium, which I've been to a few times before. So I'm super excited for that. I love dancing is one of those real endorphin kickers for me that I love. I still love to go out and dance. I think my kids find it embarrassing now. And our taste in music's slightly different. But yeah, for sure. Love to get on the dance floor. So anything by, I don't know, Avicii or Lost Frequencies or David Guetta. Some of
I would
the
not have guessed. So there you go. That's why it's so interesting asking these weirdo questions, because then you learn something really interesting and cool. So tell us a bit more about you, Charlie.
wow. I think what would I say? I think I'm probably a little unusual in terms of my career path. Probably is considered somewhat unconventional. Um,
Mhm.
I I spent a little bit of time doing scientific research in my postgrad days, and then did a stint in management consulting before probably what was a chance conversation resulted in me entering the world of independent talent. Um, so I guess I've always tried to take on roles that challenge and develop me. And so when the opportunity to found an office and grow a team culture with CoMatch back in 2018, he was acquired by Malt in 2022. It was kind of, I would say, too good an opportunity to say no to. So I jumped in. So I spent the last 6 years working in the sort of startup scale up scene. Um, I don't think I'd be the first person to say that, a year working for a startup is equivalent. It's like dog years. It's, the equivalent of, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years or something. So yeah, 6 years for sure feels like longer because so much changes in that time. Um, but I think the thing I've probably enjoyed the most over that time is having the opportunity to grow and build a team. I have people still working with me today who, 5, 6 years ago I hired as interns, and it's been super cool to watch them grow and develop as they've sort of, progressed through their careers. And now they in turn, some of them have teams which they manage, which has been super nice to see.
Brilliant. So you've been growing an international scale up with international teams. So how do you manage to ensure the organization is transparent with these individuals and empathetic?
I think that's always a dynamic or an interesting dynamic when you're working for essentially the UK affiliate of what is a European headquartered business. So
Mm.
first Berlin and then Paris have been the centers of gravity, so to speak, in terms of navigating that. I mean, I think one of the things I've enjoyed a lot about the last 6 years is the fact that the business is international. That means you get to work with a really diverse group of people, um, from all different nationalities and backgrounds. I think that brings a lot of diversity of thought into the organization. Thankfully for me, because I'm not brilliant at languages, the business language is English, and I have so much respect for all those individuals who work in English as their second or sometimes even third language. Um, so I think given that there's a very important piece around communication, we all spend probably way too much time sending Slack messages back and forth or emails. And some people are more comfortable writing, I think, than talking. But I think there's a lot of value to be had when you do have those face-to-face conversations, ideally in person, although, as we are all now well adept at navigating video calls. So, I mean, I think there has to be an understanding in that context of kind of central versus local needs. Because what may work brilliantly in one country doesn't necessarily always work or can be translated to another country. That's not to say that you can have completely different operational processes for each market. Otherwise, that it becomes a little unwielding when you're trying to sort of scale a business. But I think paying credence to the local nuances is super important, and a lot of that can come down to cultural ways of doing business. So how receptive are people, for example, to you reaching out to them and being like, hey, I've just launched here, I'd love to have a chat with you about our business model and what you think we're doing, to see if it resonates. That's quite hard to do in the UK unless there's some kind of common connection, whether that's used to both go to the same university or perhaps you've worked with the same organization. We found that people are much more willing in the UK to give you some of their time if there is a little bit more of that personal touch, versus other countries where I think perhaps people are a little bit politer and will reply to an email. You send it to send the sort of equivalent message to them. So I think there's sort of there's definitely nuances around that when you're looking at scaling internationally. I think therefore it's super important to have local talent on the ground in the country that you're growing, to understand some of those dynamics. Um, you know, sometimes that helps from a language perspective. Other times it's because they bring sort of knowledge and content from having worked in the market or the respective industry. So I think that for me, what I've found over the past few years has been really important. Having said that, actually, the UK team that I've built is probably one of the most diverse in the organisation. So yes, we have people, who grew up in the UK. Equally, we've got a lot of people that bring a lot of international experience with them, and who, up to move their lives from Paris and Madrid. Um, and and with that comes the content knowledge of the business and how things have done, what's worked in other markets, sharing learnings, I think, between people. It has also been another thing that has been helpful, because it allows us to test and learn a bit quicker. Obviously, we have our own ideas as well, but if we know something's worked really well in another market, then maybe that gets bumped up the priority list in terms of our focus. I think from the on the empathetic side of things, and I'd say this was particularly important, and I'm almost loath to mention the word COVID, but during the pandemic, um, I think the ability to be transparent, because it builds trust. I think probably a lot of that comes from some of my own experiences of being managed by people that don't understand the bigger picture and the human side of life. With COVID, it affected everybody and it affected people in different ways. But um, probably 11, 12 years ago now, in fact, my mum passed away from breast cancer. And that was back in the day when really it wasn't the done thing to work from home. Um, and that really wasn't well received by the senior leadership in the organisation that I was working at at that time. Um, so I think understanding things like that has in turn meant that when people in my team have been going through stuff, um, I know it's important for me to understand their team, their motivation and work with them to support them if they have, other things going on, outside of their work life, um, to, understand what's going on so that that can be, navigated around and they can be supported to do, their job in the best way possible.
Thank you for that. So I understand that you're the only female UK leader in your company, even though it's
Yes.
got multiple headquarters across Europe.
Yes. Um, I think that's probably it's almost something I'm used to now, sadly. I think having done science at university and then consulting or management consulting even now is still quite a male dominated industry because the role that I hold now is, on the management slash commercial side of the business. Um, More often than not, I think it's well, you see examples of men that have gone into those types of roles. So, across our country leadership group, which is maybe 10 or so of us, I am the only female. Um, I'm pleased to see that there are, our new head of sales in the UK, for example, is a lady. We just had one of our top talent transfer over from Paris to take on that role, and the same is true actually in France. Both of our VP sales are women. So it's not that we don't have examples of women in leadership positions. I think for sure there should always be more. I don't think that balance, not just for the business that I work in, but I think, more broadly, I don't think that gender imbalance is fully addressed. But yeah, it's I think for sure it makes some meetings interesting. It can be hard to get a word in edgeways perhaps sometimes, and I think there's a lot of perceptions that perhaps come with being a female leader. If you ask questions, then you're perhaps seen as too challenging or aggressive in a way a man just never would be. But I like to ask questions, so I'm afraid that doesn't stop me.
Yeah, I like asking questions as a diagnostic. So, how do you deal with those challenges then? Because you're clearly present when you're in that room.
Yeah, I think you probably learn to grow a bit of a thick skin after a while. I'm really passionate about what I do. Um, I love the team that I've grown. Um, so to me, the motivation comes from, whether that's defending the interests of the UK business or, um, seeking to raise things that will improve the overall functioning, of the business. Uh, I don't think I've ever been one from shying away from raising those things because the sentiment behind that is to improve things. Um, and so ultimately, I suppose it comes down to the environment of, do you want truth sayers in your business and people that are willing to, put their neck above the parapet and go, hey, I'm not sure about this. So we thought about doing it this way. Could we look to improve it because I'm getting this feedback from clients in the market? Or do you, are you in an environment where what is better rewarded are yes people? I for sure am not a yes person. If, rightly or wrongly, if I have something on my mind, I will I will speak up and say it.
That's the only way to be, I would say. How do you deal with the communication style differences across cultures? Because I've done a lot of training throughout Europe and elsewhere, and culturally things are very different. So how do you within your organization, because it's so dispersed, how do you deal with the cultural differences when you're communicating?
I think probably at an organizational level, um, it's not necessarily dealt with. I think at an individual level, what I found works best is getting to know people. Um, Whenever I have someone new start in the team, or if I know I'm going to be working with someone extensively on a project, um, then I will always ask them what their preferences are around that.
Hmm.
Um, like as an example, I'm quite often in back-to-back meetings all day. So um, what I would say to my team is that if you really need me for something, if you need a response on something, then drop me a WhatsApp because otherwise you're going to send me a message and it's going to get lost in my inbox or Slack amongst hundreds of other messages. Uh, Equally, I would, you know, log on after I put the kids to bed and had dinner, which means I'm responding to stuff at night. I don't always remember to hit delayed send so that people get it the next morning because it's not that I'm expecting, I've made it clear that I'm not expecting a response at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. That's just when I've managed to get to whatever the topic is at hand. So I think understanding people's preferences around that is important. I'm probably more direct than your average Brit. Not to over stereotypify, but I found with my German colleagues, I'm probably not direct enough, for example. So I think yeah, it's around understanding at an individual level, sort of what works for people and how people like to be spoken to. Um, we had an example recently between our sales and product team actually, where um, one side wanted the communication to be more empathetic, and perhaps the other side had been a little bit too direct and short in the written comms that had gone back and forth. And so I think as well, remembering that, everyone is working hard and everyone is trying to do their best. And remembering that there's another human being on the end of that message or email or whatever it is. I think it's why it's often easier to jump on the phone with someone. Um, if you can't do it in person because you're in different locations across Europe or the Middle East, then that's probably the next best thing. And I still don't think we do it enough. We've got so used to firing messages off and expecting instant responses back from people. Um, I mean, I set a do not disturb on my Slack. If I'm trying to get a piece of focus work done, or if I know I'm going to be in meetings, then I set my status as a way of kind of do not disturb, so that to set expectations with people that I'm not going to be on there responding to stuff within a minute of the message being pinged.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Before we end our conversation today, is there anything that you want to add or share?
I mean, I suppose there's so many things tied up with sort of growing a business, but I think probably the overarching pieces for me are that the combination of being transparent and empathetic, and like to do that, you have to be authentic and true to your values. I know there are various lists you can have of qualities and characteristics that you need to be a successful leader. Um, but I think sort of, I suppose, the ability to trust people and support them really goes such a long way in terms of building that trust and in turn building a team's resilience. Because when you're growing a business, it is challenging and it is tiring. But I think if people can see that you trust in them and that you're in it with them, but that you're not afraid to make tough decisions when they're needed, that engenders a certain respect, which, I know that my team know that they can approach me with any issue when they need to, and we'll figure it out and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Charlie, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Judith.
You're welcome. And thank you out there for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I'm Judith Germain, your host, and I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.